What if everything you've been told about being too much is actually evidence of something extraordinary? Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll understand why Carl Jung believed that the very traits society criticizes might actually hold the keys to your deepest purpose. Imagine being told all your life that you're too intense, too sensitive, or too complicated. Now, what if I told you that those traits could be signs of a rare and powerful psychological type? Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But what if who you truly are doesn't fit the mold? What if your intensity, your sensitivity, your refusal to accept shallow answers aren't flaws to be fixed, but instead signs of a deeper, more complex nature? If you've ever felt like an outsider in your own life, if people have called you too deep or too complicated, this isn't a coincidence. It could be that you're one of the rare individuals Jung described as possessing differentiated consciousness, a way of experiencing reality that most people never develop. Here is where it gets fascinating. Jung discovered that these rare personalities often go through their entire lives thinking something is wrong with them, when in reality they're operating at a level of psychological sophistication that's truly uncommon. But there's a catch, and I'll share that with you in just a moment. Today, we're diving into 8 unmistakable signs that you might possess this rare personality type. If you recognize yourself in these patterns, it won't just change how you view your past, but it could completely revolutionize your future. But first, let me ask you this. Have you ever noticed that your emotional reactions seem disproportionate to what others experience? There's a psychological reason for this, and it's something Jung uncovered that may surprise you. Sign 1, you experience emotional depth that others can't comprehend. Carl Jung made a remarkable discovery about emotional intensity. He found that certain individuals don't just feel emotions, they experience what he called affection tone complexes, which create profound psychological resonance. In simpler terms, your emotions don't just exist on the surface, they move through you like ocean currents, deep, transformative, and powerful. What Jung realized that most people miss is that this is not emotional instability. This is emotional sophistication. But why does society try to convince you otherwise? When you feel deeply, you're not overreacting. You're accessing layers of psychological experience that most people have learned to suppress. Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." Your emotional intensity isn't a burden, it's a form of psychological radar that detects what others can't see. You feel the unspoken tension in rooms. You sense when someone's smile doesn't match their eyes. You carry the emotional undercurrents of every interaction because your psyche is wired for depth, not for surface-level pleasantries. But here's where it gets interesting and where most people with this trait make a critical mistake that keeps them stuck. Society tells you to tone it down, to be more reasonable, to stop making everything so dramatic. But Jung understood that when you suppress this emotional depth, you don't become normal. You become neurotic. You start experiencing what he called psychological splitting, where part of you knows the truth, but another part tries to conform. This is why you may have felt exhausted trying to be someone you're not. What if I told you that Jung discovered a way to transform this emotional intensity from a burden into your greatest strength? Stay with me, and I'll share that technique in sign 6. Sign 2. You question everything with unrelenting curiosity. According to Carl Jung, most people live unconscious lives, accepting societal programming without examination. But you can't help but dig deeper. Jung would have recognized you as someone with an active thinking function that refuses to accept surface explanations. What's crucial here is that Jung discovered that people who question everything aren't being difficult, they're being psychologically honest. But there's a hidden cost to this honesty that most people don't realize until it's too late. You don't just ask what, you ask why. Why do people stay in relationships that make them miserable? Why do we accept systems that don't serve us? Why do we pretend that shallow conversations are meaningful connections? Your mind is constantly seeking truth beneath appearances. Jung called this the transcendent function, the psychological ability to see beyond current limitations. While others accept the status quo, you're already envisioning what could be different, what could be better, what could be more authentic. But here's the paradox Jung identified. The more clearly you see, the more isolated you can become. Why? Because your questions challenge other people's comfortable illusions. When you ask deep questions, you're not just seeking answers. you're shaking the very foundation of what others believe is true. This is why you've probably been called cynical or negative when you're actually being courageously honest. Jung discovered something fascinating about people like you. You have what he called prophetic consciousness. You see where things are heading before others do. And with this gift comes a responsibility when I'll reveal in sign 7. Sign 3, you've developed fierce independence as psychological survival. Carl Jung once said, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. And you've learned to do exactly this, not by choice, but by necessity. According to Jung's research, people with rare personalities often develop individuated consciousness earlier than others, usually through adversity. Your independence isn't just a defense mechanism, it's an achievement. And society will try to convince you otherwise, which can be dangerous. You've learned through painful experience that depending on others for your sense of worth is psychological quicksand. So you built yourself. You stood up often alone and created an identity that couldn't be taken away by someone else's opinion or absence. Jung called this process individuation, the journey toward becoming whole. Most people never complete this journey because it requires facing what Jung termed the shadow, all the parts of yourself that you've been taught to reject. But here's where it gets complex. Your independence attracts people who want to possess it and repels people who feel threatened by it. Jung identified a pattern in how independent personalities navigate relationships. Understanding this pattern changes everything. You don't need someone to complete you. You seek relationships from choice, not desperation. You don't want someone to save you. You want someone to stand beside you as you both continue growing. Jung discovered something profound about people who achieve true independence. They become magnets for both authentic love and manipulative control. The key is knowing the difference, and I'll share how you can identify this in sign 7. Sign 4, you possess intuitive awareness that borders on psychic. Jung revolutionized psychology when he identified intuition as a legitimate psychological function. He said intuition is perception via the unconscious that brings forth ideas, images, possibilities, ways out of a blocked situation by a process that is mostly unconscious. Some people's nervous systems are wired to pick up information that others miss entirely. But this gift comes with a burden that can destroy relationships if not understood. You don't just observe people, you read their psychological state. You notice micro-expressions, energy shifts, and the words they don't say. When someone says they're fine but their body language screams distress, you can't unsee it. When there's tension in a room that everyone else seems to ignore, you feel it in your bones. This isn't paranoia, it's psychological sensitivity at a high level. But here's Jung's warning. If you don't learn to protect this sensitivity, it will exhaust you. Jung discovered a specific technique that allows intuitive people to maintain their awareness without absorbing everyone else's emotional chaos. Sign 5, you crave meaning over social acceptance. Jung once said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But what if being true to yourself means rejecting everything society tells you to want? Jung discovered that certain personalities are psychologically incapable of living in authentic lives. Your psyche demands meaning, and this creates a specific psychological conflict that can be devastating if not understood. You've probably tried living for external validation, following the script, saying the right things, and playing the expected role. But Jung would have recognized the symptoms immediately: the gnawing emptiness, the quiet desperation beneath the applause. You can't pretend that shallow goals matter. You can't settle for relationships built on convenience. This is why you've felt like an alien in your own culture. But Jung identified something remarkable about people who prioritize meaning. They become evolutionary catalysts for human consciousness. By rejecting superficial connections, you force others to confront their own inauthenticity. And that's where the true transformation happens. Sign 6, you've outgrown people and environments that once fit. Jung said, the greatest tragedy of the family is the unlived lives of the parents. But what happens when you refuse to live an unlived life? When you grow beyond the psychological limitations of your environment, you start experiencing the painful realization that the people who once knew you don't anymore. This isn't because you've become superior or difficult. It's because you've shed layers of conditioning that no longer serve you. Jung called this psychological death and rebirth. You can't go back. Once you've tasted authentic living, you can't return to unconscious conformity. Sign 7, you offer profound presence in a distracted world. Jung said the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. You may not realize it, but you possess the ability to create psychological transformation simply by showing up authentically. When someone speaks to you, they feel truly seen in a way that's rare. You don't just listen to their words, you perceive their underlying emotional state. You offer deep witnessing, not quick fixes. But Jung's crucial insight was that empathetic people often exhaust themselves by giving too much. Sign 8. You sense a larger purpose you can't yet define. Jung believed that people like you with an undefined but urgent sense of purpose are responding to what he called an archetypal calling. This isn't about fame or recognition. It's about living in alignment with your deepest nature. Jung understood that individuals like you serve as bridges between the unconscious and conscious realms of human experience. Your sensitivity isn't a weakness, it's a superpower. Your intensity isn't too much. It's exactly what the world needs. Your refusal to settle isn't difficult, it's brave. You're not just different, you're part of the leading edge of human consciousness. And if even half of these signs resonated with you, you're not alone. You are essential for humanity's psychological evolution. Remember, you're not too much, the world is too little. And Jung knew that people like you are the ones who change that.